Welcome to SoulPod Studio. We're not your average social network. We're a community of professionals, enthusiasts, and students taking sustainability to the next level. Join us on our journey and get inspired by Earth heroes just like you.
Welcome back to SoulPod Studio. I'm Amy Farrell, and today I'm delighted to have Daisy Nicholls join us from London. Welcome, Daisy.
Thank you for having me.
So, you have worked in sustainable food systems, addressing food waste at the local and global levels. Can you tell us what inspired you to get involved in this topic?
Thank you. For as long as I remember, I've wanted to work in sustainability, and I've always felt a sense of duty to do my bit. And I've always loved food and eating and cooking new things. But despite my love of food, I don't really remember being truly aware of the scale of the world's food waste problem until after university, when I started working at a charity called the Felix Project. So the Felix Project is a London-based charity that was set up in memory of my friend's brother, Felix, who died suddenly of meningitis in 2014. When I graduated from university, I started a short-term role with them to help with their Christmas fundraising campaign. The Felix Project rescue good quality surplus food from the food industry that cannot be sold for various reasons and would otherwise go to waste. They then deliver this food to charities in London to help feed vulnerable people. The volunteers at the Felix Project collect and deliver tons of really amazing high-quality food. And as someone who really appreciates food, I couldn't believe that without the Felix Project, this food would otherwise have been thrown away. So I became really interested in food waste, and the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to do something to help. Reducing food waste just seems like such a no-brainer to me. And it was my drive to reduce food waste on an even larger scale that then motivated me to apply to Tesco, the largest supermarket in the UK. I applied to join their supply chain team, where the challenge is to balance maintaining great availability of products for customers whilst minimizing food waste.
Thank you for that background, Daisy. I understand that you studied chemistry, completing both an undergraduate and a graduate program. How have your educational experiences prepared you to work in this field?
Yeah, so I think I was drawn to studying chemistry because I've always enjoyed solving problems, and I was keen to understand more about how the world works, and specifically as it relates to food waste. Food waste is mostly organic materials, so composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and small amounts of other elements. And when food waste goes to a landfill site, this organic material is buried, so there is a lack of oxygen. And microorganisms begin to break the material down in a process known as anaerobic digestion. So this is digestion in the absence of oxygen. And the byproducts of this process are carbon dioxide and methane, which are two potent greenhouse gases. Due to its molecular structure, methane traps more heat in the atmosphere per molecule than carbon dioxide. And as a result, its 100-year global warming potential is around 28 times that of carbon dioxide. Sometimes, to avoid methane being released directly into the atmosphere and also to recover energy from the food waste, organizations carry out this anaerobic digestion process inside a closed system. And the methane given off is then captured, and this biogas is used to generate electricity or heat or transport fuels. So about 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption globally is wasted. And the IPCC estimate that food waste contributes about 8 to 10% of total man-made greenhouse gas emissions. But I think it's also important to remember that it's not only the greenhouse gases released directly by the food rotting in landfill sites that's the problem. It's the fact that when we waste food, we waste the labour, the effort, the investment, the precious resources that go into producing the food, the water, the seeds, the feed, and also the resources that go into transporting the food and processing the food. Hence why food waste is such a significant issue.
Why is it, Daisy, that we hear more about carbon dioxide or CO2 and less about methane when we hear about greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah, I think on a global scale, I think there is more CO2 out there, but the problem with methane, as I just mentioned, is the fact that its global warming potential is higher than CO2 due to its molecular structure. I think part of the reason that we focus on CO2 is that we measure greenhouse gases in carbon dioxide equivalents. And so each greenhouse gas has a particular lifetime and has a particular warming potential. We understand that of CO2 better than methane. And the way that we measure greenhouse gases is relative to CO2. So I think that is part of the reason that is what we focus on.
So coming back to the problems related to food waste. So what are some of the ways that we can address food waste?
Yeah, so I guess it's important to recognize that in different parts of the world and in different industries, the main causes of food waste vary. So in developing countries, for example, the majority of losses occur earlier in the supply chain, such as during the harvest and processing, whereas in more industrialized countries, the losses tend to happen more at the retail or consumer level. So when I was working at Tesco, I was in their forecasting team, and we were using data to try and match the amount of food that we ordered from suppliers to the amount of food we expected to sell to customers. And therefore, by matching these two numbers, we could reduce the amount of food that we wasted. If Tesco can't sell food, they distribute it to community groups and charities like the Felix Project, or they offer it to their colleagues for a cheap price. Any surplus that is still then remaining is converted into animal feed or turned into energy via this anaerobic digestion process that we were just talking about. So none of their food waste, for example, goes to landfill in the UK. And I think with food retailers, something that's very important is them publishing their food waste data on their websites, for example, as this holds them to account and ensures that they are working to manage their food waste. Other examples of initiatives by supermarkets to reduce food waste include selling wonky fruit and vegetables, removing best before dates, stopping 2-for-1 promotions, and also using innovative packaging to prolong the shelf life of food products. However, this is quite an interesting, challenging area because it can also increase plastic waste if you're using soft plastic packaging, for example. So I was lucky enough to do a master's last year in environmental technology, and my interest in sustainable food systems led me to write my master's thesis on the fast food sector. And for this, I carried out interviews with food industry professionals to explore the current practice of the UK's fast food businesses and compare these with the practices required to achieve healthy and sustainable diets. And interestingly, during one of these interviews, food waste was highlighted as fast food's biggest issue and its biggest opportunity, because food waste is both an environmental problem, but it's also a financial problem for these companies. And actually in the UK alone, food waste costs the hospitality industry £3.2 billion each year. And it's estimated that 3/4 of this is actually avoidable. So for fast food, or the food service industry, as it's also called, overproduction at the counter and customer plate waste or leftovers are the most common reasons for food being wasted. And the most common reason for leftovers is that the portions are too large. So fast food companies have made some efforts to donate unused food and to avoid sending waste to landfill. For example, they use their waste cooking oil to make biodiesel to run their lorries. However, there is little evidence of these companies doing customer engagement to prevent these leftovers. This could be due to an absence of data. It's very hard for these companies to understand exactly how much food their customers are throwing away in the restaurants. So more research and more innovation is needed in this area. But one sort of less obvious improvement area that I read about was apparently studies show that using non-disposable plates in fast food restaurants can actually lead to food waste reduction. I guess because if you have a plastic plate, for example, or plastic packaging, you just throw the food away inside the packaging. Whereas if you have a plate that someone's going to reuse, you're more likely to clear your plate. So I thought that was quite an unusual or interesting area.
It sounds like some food retailers and restaurants, including fast food restaurants, are taking steps to manage their food waste. But as you said, much more research and innovation is needed. If we bring it down to the individual level, what can each of us do to address food waste?
Yeah, there's definitely so many things we can do in our day-to-day lives. And I actually read a statistic the other day that 70% of food that's wasted in the UK is wasted by citizens in their own homes. And also, apparently 81% of citizens are concerned about climate change. However, only 37% make that connection with wasting food. So I think actually talking about food waste more to raise awareness is a huge part of this. So reducing food waste at home requires a mindset change and behaviour change. Things like only buying what you need, not getting pulled into tempting promotions, meal planning, batch cooking, storing food correctly, freezing food, coming up with creative recipes to use leftovers, not throwing away good food. Understanding best before dates is really important. Only the use by date actually refers to food safety. I personally find it quite a fun challenge to use leftovers. It encourages me to be more creative and try cooking new things. Like I made a potato and pineapple curry this week, for example, which was interesting.
That sounds amazing. Very creative.
Thank you. There are apps as well, like Olio and Too Good to Go, where you can get notified of food being sold at a reduced price in your area. Some towns have community fridges. You can volunteer for charities like the Felix Project that I mentioned. You can check and see if there's food waste collection in your area. You could get your own compost bin. A huge amount of food that is wasted because it doesn't meet the high quality standards in supermarkets. So it's always good to keep an eye out for ugly fruit and veg. Use overripe fruit for baking and smoothies, and it actually tastes better to use these overripe fruit in these cases. I think people often ignore all these things because of the time pressures of our busy lives. And also sometimes when food is relatively cheap, putting in the effort to use it doesn't feel worth it. But I find it helpful to remember that it all adds up. Reducing the food you throw away does save you money. And it's estimated that in the UK, families throw away around £720 of food each year.
Oh, that's incredible. Gosh. And as you said, if we just made everyone aware of these different, kind of workarounds or suggestions like you've made, that perhaps they would take steps and proactively work towards not, wasting as much food.
Exactly. I think raising awareness of food waste and reconnecting people with the food they eat and the process that goes into making it will really help people appreciate it more. So, for example, growing your own food at home can really help you appreciate the work that goes into food production. And I think it's also worth saying that it's good to think about these things as a whole and to think about the whole food system. So, for example, ultra-processed foods will have a longer shelf life, so perhaps may lead to less food waste. However, they are really bad for our health. So we do need to be conscious to look at food systems holistically, I guess.
So more recently, you moved into sustainable finance. Can you tell us why you made this career pivot? And did you need to take any courses or pursue any certificates to get more knowledgeable on finance?
Yeah, of course. So I think personally, if we are going to reduce food waste and address all these issues in our food system, finance is really essential, as we need to incentivize the transition to a sustainable food system. But as you've heard, my background was not in finance. So I was really keen to learn more, and I needed to learn how to speak the finance language, I suppose. So I found webinars and courses that you can do online have been really helpful. So, for example, the UN Climate Change Learning Partnership website has a whole range of free training courses on all kinds of topics such as climate change and sustainable investing. And these courses vary quite a bit in length. Some are just 2 hours and some are around 10 hours. But you get a certificate when you complete the course. So that's always quite nice. And a key area in the world of sustainability at the moment is transparency and disclosure. And the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, or TCFD as it's known, have a learning hub where you can learn about their disclosure standards. With disclosure being regulated more and more now globally, many regulations are based on the TCFD. So this training will be very useful for anyone working in finance or in companies as well.
So you're working in impact investing now, right? Can you explain to us what you're doing and share if there's linkages in your work to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
Now I'm working for a women-owned impact investing consulting firm called Impact Arc. We are a team that's passionate about mobilizing capital for purpose, and we support clients with optimizing the environmental and social impact of their investments and accelerating the shift to a net zero and inclusive global economy. So every one of the Sustainable Development Goals has a target that requires some sort of financial investment. And according to the UN, around 5 to 7 trillion US dollars is needed to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So this means financial resources are needed at scale from both the public and private sectors. So what is impact investing? Well, impact investing unlocks private capital to address environmental and social issues. The SDGs outline the issues the world needs to address and thereby provides impact investors with a framework to assess the positive impact of their investments. The SDGs also recognize that all these issues are connected and affect everyone. And if you think about food systems, for example, building a more sustainable food system won't just help end hunger, it will help progress all 17 SDGs. And food is a common thread that links all the goals together. And in fact, I think fixing our food system is fundamental if we are to achieve the SDGs. For example, if only a quarter of the food wasted could be saved, it would feed 870 million people.
Turning to our last question, and this is one we pose to each of our guests. If you could have a sustainability superpower, what would it be and why?
So to keep with the food theme, my sustainability superpower would be to turn all the carbon dioxide, all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere into a nutritious and delicious food source so that everyone in the world could have access to environmentally healthy food. And actually, I read a story the other day. There's a company called Solar Foods that are piloting a technology to turn emission-free electricity and captured CO2 into edible calories. So perhaps my superpower is not so far away.
That's right. So it might be just around the corner. That's amazing.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, Daisy, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time today. It's been great learning about your journey, and thank you for all the contributions you've made towards sustainable food systems and impact investing. We really enjoyed having you on the podcast. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
SoulPod Studio is made possible by listeners like you. Join the free SoulPods platform to become a part of our virtual community of changemakers. Links to our social media, website, and platform can be found below in the show notes. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to rate and review our podcast. Thank you for listening and for your support.